Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Last year, or in 2024, which is still kind of weird for me to wrap my head around, I started a series of videos where I wanted to basically rank all of the 5th edition D&D releases before the D&D 2024 books started to come out. Now, obviously, I missed that target by a mile, considering that the Player's Handbook and DMG are already available, but I might be able to get at least a couple of videos out before the Monster Manual hits, before the full set of the core rules are available. So in the first video, I did the box sets, like the starter sets, kind of ranking them from my least favorite to my favorite. And I'm going to be doing the same thing here today with what I'm referring to as the rules expansion book, or the expanded options books from 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. There's actually more than I initially thought when I was contemplating doing this video. And for the purpose of this video, a rules expansion or options expansion book, whatever you want to call it, is basically not an adventure, it's not a campaign setting, but it's a book that has either like new monsters or options for monsters, new player character abilities, maybe some optional rules, as well as just some things to kind of add flavor to the game world. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at here today, and these are just my personal rankings. I actually enjoy pretty much all of these books. There was one that I was really harsh on that I've kind of softened my stance on, so we'll be taking a look at that one here. But I do like all of these books, and I appreciate the hard work that the people, the authors, the writers, and the artists that contributed to these books, what they went through. So I enjoy having all of these in my collection, but there's going to be some that I just purely like more than others, and part of it is going to be based off how much I considered actually using it in my current 5th edition game, which I am running Rime of the Frost Maiden once again for a new group, but I'm using the 2024 5th edition books that are available, so the Player's Handbook, DMG, and I have been using the original Monster Manual, although that might change when the new one comes out. But anyway, let's get into the ranking video. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 books, which I probably should have counted before I started the video. But let's just go ahead and start with number 8 on this list, and this is the Acquisitions Incorporated book. Now, this was not really something I think that was meant to be taken seriously in the first place, so I know that this book kind of has a lot of people really seem to strongly dislike this one for some reason. I think it's just meant to be sort of like a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing, but there is some cool stuff in this book. Number one, I was a huge fan of Acquisitions Incorporated for quite a while. I'm a few years behind now in their live plays. I should actually start checking them out again because Jim Dark Magic has come back to at least some of them. But I did find that after Mike Krahulik left, it was kind of like the heart and soul of the group was no longer there. I watched a couple of the videos or the live plays that were done without him. But, now that he's back, I really should sort of try to get back into it here. But yeah, so here we've got the cover, which I believe was done by Mike Krahulik here. A lot of the artwork inside has been, there's some cool references here to like the Beholder tank and stuff like that they've had. They've got things like the Clockwork Dragon, the CAG robots, which is really kind of cool to see. But what I really like about this book is that it actually has some really cool information on creating and sort of what goes into running a business. Now, this isn't something that would normally be done a lot in D&D games, with Acquisitions Incorporated sort of being like this franchise. But there is some cool stuff in here, and I think that this would actually work really well in an Eberron campaign setting, where it's has sort of like more modern concepts in it, like, businesses and you've got like newspaper publications, and you got all kinds of stuff like that. And I think having these sort of options, if your players want to actually operate a business in like any sort of D&D setting, but I think truly Eberron would be the best location for it. But there is some really cool stuff in here, and I think that again, it's not something that's meant to be taken super seriously, but there is some fun stuff in here. One of the things I actually really like in this book is some of the spells here, and again, just a really interesting concept. There's some adventure stuff in here as well, so I guess I could have included this in the adventure, and I don't know if I'll be able to find it easily or not. So let's go back to the options here. So new spells, page 74. But one of the things I think is just kind of cool is that they introduce spells here that actually have a new component. So you've got, for example, Jim's Magic Missile, which has the royalty component. So again, I thought this is something that'd be kind of neat if you have a player that kind of like has a signature spell that they use. You might work with them to create their sort of own spin on it that you can use, and then they can like basically license the spell out. So in order to cast a spell, you have to have a gold piece. So anytime that you cast a spell, it just basically removes a gold piece from your character's possession and into a vault, I guess, that's owned by Jim Dark Magic. And if you don't have any gold on you, or the equivalent of a gold piece on you, then you can't cast the spell. But I just thought that was kind of like, again, just a neat little throw-in. And if you really want to get into like the corporate aspect of, you know, having like businesses and stuff like that, letting your players create signature spells and then license them out with a royalty component, I thought would actually be kind of neat. But again, like, this is not a book that's meant to be taken super seriously. It's not really one that I would use unless I really wanted to dive into that. And you can do stuff with that, like corporate intrigue campaigns can be a lot of fun. But yeah, it's something that, like I said, it's at the bottom of this list because I'm really not likely to use it. I bought it primarily because, you know, I love Acquisitions Incorporated, and you know, I wanted to have the book, you know, by them. But there's some kind of neat stuff in here if you're looking to have sort of a less serious or a more corporate oriented tone to your D&D games. All right, so coming in at number 7, we've got Volos Guide to Monsters. And this is a really good book. Like, I'm not going to say that this is low on the list because of the fact that I don't like the book. Like I said, I do like all of these books. But I've been running 5th edition for quite a while, and I don't think I've ever actually used anything in this book, mainly because from past experiences, I've learned that I really don't like having to reference a ton of books when I'm running a game. Like, I was playing under a DM who would have encounters that was like using a magazine, like a dungeon magazine, and like 2 or 3 other books for the different stat blocks. And all the power to him. If he enjoys that, that's great. But it just, I hate doing that personally. It reminds me of when I was running 3.5 and my bookshelf was in my bedroom at the apartment that I used to live in. And I would end up just bringing out the books that I thought I would need, but then, you know, someone would have a feat that they didn't know what it came from, or a magic item or a spell that they didn't know where it came from. So I would end up going back and forth, and I would end the day with like a stack of books like 20 high. So yeah, I just don't like using a lot of extra books for stuff. But this is, you know, this is a really cool book. There are some cool creatures and stuff in here. So we got like the Bodak, which I do actually really like. No Hukiva, which is unfortunate. I don't know if they've actually done a 5th edition version of that creature, but there's like some character races here, so you do have a lot of options there, like the lizard folk I really enjoy, which haven't appeared in the current, like the 2024 5th edition stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's some cool stuff in here, like the maps and things like that. So it can be really useful for sort of pick up and play type of adventures, but I just really haven't used this book myself personally. And there's another monster book that I would be more likely to use than this one, because this one has been sort of replaced by one that's going to appear later in the video. But again, some really cool stuff in this book. It is a fantastic book. It's just one that I've never really used, and part of the ranking is like how much I've actually, you know, look forward to using or have used the book in my D&D 5th edition experiences. And unfortunately, this one I've just never got around to really using. So really cool book, but one that I've kind of excuse me, one that I've kind of had sitting on my shelf for ever since I bought it. All right, so coming in at number 6, we've got Tashas Cauldron of Everything. And this was a book that I was pretty harsh on when it first came out. And I will say that I probably wasn't 100% fair in that assessment. So this is my opportunity to sort of right that wrong. Which, it's still kind of low in the ranking, but there are other books that I just find more interesting. But one of my biggest issues with Tashas Cauldron was the handling of psionics and the reprinting of options that were presented in other books. So, for example, psionics are just expansion or like class archetypes that you can have. So, where we have one here, I think the rogue has. Oh, the sorcerer definitely has one here. So the aberrant mind is one of the psionic options there. You also have the soul knife, which was part of the rogue class. But I really felt that those should have been like their own sort of, options. But that being said, the psionics aside, which I still think they really should have been like their own full classes, the fact that I didn't like that the Artificer and a couple of the class options from some of the different campaign setting books was reproduced, I don't think in retrospect that was a fair statement to make, because not everybody has things like Mythic Odyssey of Theros or the Eberron campaign setting. So giving them a book that they could have one book that has those options in them, I think that's a totally fair and valid thing to do after, it's the other books have been out for a while. In things like Mythic Odysseys of Theros, for example, I don't even know if it stayed in print for all that long. I don't see it anywhere that sells 5e books in this day and age, so I don't know. But there are some other cool things in here. There are some really cool subclass options. In my current 5e game that I'm running, one of the players is using the Scribe Mage subclass. Which, see if I can find it here. Shouldn't be too hard to locate here. So we got so they have like the living spell book kind of thing. Those are warlocks. Okay, wizard. So yeah, the Order of Scribes. So they have like the quill that can write the spells in for them. They have this awakened spell book. Although they don't gain these features at second level in using the new 5e rules. They gain them at third. Everything else is the same level though, so that works perfectly fine. But yeah, it's really cool to kind of see there like those options available. And this did give you an alternate options for creating your characters. So for example, it had the option to take a +2 into one attribute and then +1 into another attribute, or +1 into 3 different attributes, rather than relying on your character's race for those. You could just sort of customize. And I don't really mind that. Like, I kind of did at the time, but the more that I think about it, the more I kind of like the idea that your attribute bonuses should be more in tune to like the character's upbringing and not necessarily just like what they were born as. I mean, you look at humans are all very different from one another. So, it makes sense that there are some dwarves that aren't as hardy, or into like, war and battle and things like that. So, and that did sort of become a default, and it was changed around in the new 5e where it's tied to your background. And I do want to do a 2024 or D&D 5.24, whatever you want to call it, video once the Monster Manual comes out to share my thoughts on the actual products themselves. And we'll talk about that sort of there. But you do have this more ability to customize, and this actually became the default for a while. There were other books that came out that introduced new races that like they didn't have stat options included in there, because the option of like choosing a +2 and a +1 or 3 +1s did become the default. So there is some cool stuff in this book, and I was a little harsh on it here, so I wanted to bump it up the list a little bit here. So this appears at number 6. Coming in at number 5, we've got Mordenkainen's Toma Foes. Now, this was a book that I was really looking forward to, and this is a book that I really like, aside from one inclusion that was kind of weird. So the concept of Toma Foes is to sort of go over some of like the major conflicts in like D&D lore. So you have like the Blood War, the eternal battle between demons and devils. You've got the discord between the surface elves and the drow. You've got the dwarves and Dwargar, the Gith Zerai and Gith Yankee and their conflicts, which all makes total sense and was a lot of fun to read in these books. But then there's like halflings and gnomes, and I don't know if maybe I missed it. I mean, maybe it has been a part of D&D for a very long time and I just really haven't noticed it. But I've never really been aware of any major like feuds or conflicts between halflings and gnomes. So I feel like they were thrown in here just because you had elves and dwarves already. Like, I'm sure there was something else, like, for example, giants and dragons. Because they're supposed to be like at conflict with one another. I think that would have made more sense to have in this book than halflings and gnomes, because this is about like actual like bad blood and wars and conflicts between like these different creatures, right? Demons and devils, elves or surface elves and drow, dwarves and dwargar, Githzerai and Githyanki. So I think something like giants and dragons would have made a bit more sense, or you could have even had something else. You don't want to get too campaign setting specific, so I was thinking things like Beholders and Fairmen, but that's like Forgotten Realms, and then you have things like Lycanthropes, but that was like really heavy in Eberron with the Order of the Silver Flame. So I don't know, but there could have been something better included in here than that. But there are some really cool new creatures included in this book as well. And again, I never really used a lot of the options in this book, although I do like the Bone Claw. I do have the Bone Claw mini, and it's really, really cool, along with the Cadaver Collector. So yeah, there were some options in here that I thought were really cool to have in this book. You do have the updated, like, what do they call them? Demon Lords. There we go. That's what I was trying to think of. I have not had coffee yet when I'm recording this video, and I think it shows. But yeah, so there's some really cool stuff in this book, I will say, overall. And like just reading the stuff on like the Blood War and the elves and drow and the dwarves and dwargar, the Githyanki and Githzerai was really cool. The halflings and gnomes section, though, kind of brings this book down, in my opinion, because it just feels like that was thrown in for whatever reason, like they couldn't think of something else to put in that slot. But yeah, Mordenkainen's Toma Foes is a book that I have enjoyed. I really enjoyed reading. And it was the first alternate cover book I ever purchased, because the alternate cover, the book released around my birthday, the year that it came out, and I just decided to treat myself to an alternate cover and went down and picked it up from Giant Robot Comics. All right. Number 4, we've got Glory of the Giants. So this is another monster. I would almost call this like an ecology book, and we're going to see another one here later in the video. But this is basically taking a famous group of creatures from D&D's lore and just giving them all kinds of like new options or new flavor to sort of build up adventures involving them here. Some really cool ready-to-use maps, some treasures, some new stat blocks here. For example, I love the Death Giant, and I don't know if they have the Eldritch Giant in here or not, because I do have the Eldritch Giant mini from 3rd edition, and it is absolutely I do love the Et and Ceramorph there. Although it only has one head, so I guess one head destroyed the other. Whoop! Oh, didn't mean to do that. So yeah, again, there's some really cool stuff in here. I guess it doesn't have the Eldritch Giant in there, but that's fine. There's some really cool stuff in this book. But again, I love things where it just takes like standard monsters and really fleshes them out. It reminds me of like the monster ecology articles from Dragon Magazine back in the day, which even though I always found Dragon was pretty hit or miss, I really did like the monster ecology articles that they had there. I always thought those were really cool. So anything that kind of like lets you create adventures revolving around giants, that gives you like just things to flesh them out and make them feel more real, is something that I really, really like there. And I guess I forgot to turn my dehumidifier off. But anyway, yeah, so this was a really, really cool book. And one that I think kind of flew under the radar. This was one of the more recent releases for 5th edition D&D before the like D&D 5.25 or whatever you want to call it released there. And I haven't seen a lot of people talk about this book. I probably should do a video on it on its own and go sort of more in depth on it here. But again, I love the ecology books. I think they're absolutely fantastic. All right, top 3 now. So we've got Xanathar's Guide to Everything. It has the Arcane Archer, and that's all that I need. So this was the first like really massive rules expansion book that came out. This was the one that had like new subclass options for every class that was available in the game. With the exception of, I don't think they had anything for the Artificer, because I can't remember if Eberron came out before or after this one, but you had like 3 new options, or 2 or 3 new options for every class there. So, and there were some really cool things in here. For example, the what was it, the Storm? Yeah, the Path of Storm Herald. I think somebody was playing one of those in one of the 5e games that I was running. Like I said, it has the Arcane Archer, which I appreciate because I love archers, and I really like the Arcane Archer Prestige class, so we have them there. You got the Cavalier, which makes a sort of return from first edition AD&D. So there's a lot of cool stuff in this book just for like new options. You also had like new feats and sort of expanded upon those, which is really cool to see. Some options for the different tool sets, which is something that was really missing out of the player's handbook. So it's really cool to see that in there. There was some new like traps and things like that that were included in this book as well. So this was just overall a really well-rounded addition to the 5e game. It expanded upon some of the things that were just sort of part of the player's handbook, but like I said, with the tools, didn't really have a lot of like mechanics behind them. And overall, just a really, really great addition to the 5e game. And of the 2 books that are like the 2 everything books, I think this one is still better overall than what the Tashas book was. So that's why it's at number 3. Coming in at number 2, we've got Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse. So essentially, what this is it's taking a lot of the creatures from Volos' Guide to Monsters and Mordenkainen's Toma Foes, and it was revising them to work along with. You also have like new race options in here as well that were from some of the other books. It's cool to see the turtle in there, because I think before you had to get that off of DM's Guild. But yeah, what they've sort of done is they've taken a lot of the creatures, especially ones that had spellcasting abilities in the original 5e. Because originally in 5e, what they had was spellcasting similar to the classes. So you would have like so many spells of each level, and they were the literal spells from, you know, the player's handbook. But a lot of those options that they had, because again they wanted to be like sort of combat based, they knew that a lot of those options had things like dex saving throws, which a lot of some classes had the ability to just completely ignore. It's one of the reasons why, for example, a Beholder wasn't particularly scary to a rogue, because all of their eye rays were dex saves, and they had the evasion ability. So if they made those saves, then they didn't have to worry about those options at all. So kind of what they've done is they've taken some of these spells and they've turned them into attack options instead. So, for example, you've got like Poisonous Touch, which is a touch attack that does 10d6 poison. So that before would have been like just like some sort of spell that probably would have had either a Fortitude or a Constitution or a Dexterity save to avoid, but they turned them, like I said, into actual attacks. There was one here, I can't remember exactly where it was now, and I'm not going to try looking too hard for it, but there was one where they basically changed the lightning bolt. So they had like a wizard character that, instead of having the lightning bolt spell, simply had a lightning attack. It turned to a single target, but it was now an attack roll that just did the damage. So if it hits, it did like its d8s or whatever it was that the lightning bolt spell does. And it was just, again, kind of a way of taking the evasion ability and nerfing it a little bit, because it really did get to be quite game-changing at higher levels. So, yeah, anyway, some really cool stuff in here. We do have our Goth Beholder, and again, we have our eye rays, which are rolled randomly, which I never liked in D&D, but they did change things like the Enervation Ray is now a con save, the Fire Ray is still a dex save, the Paralyzing Ray is con, so they actually made them a bit more logical, because one of the other things with Beholders in the original 5e was that everything was a dex save, everything. So even if it didn't make sense for it to be a deck save, it was still a deck save. Like, you're basically dodging the ray kind of thing. So they have actually changed some of these to have them make a bit more sense. If the ability would target like the body, like for disintegrate or stuff like that, then it should be a con save and not a deck save. But anyway, again, just some really cool stuff in here. And again, if I were to add a second monster book to my when I'm running games, this has stuff from both Xanathars or both Volos and Mordenkainen, so I would just see me using this over the other two. So, and again, I like the fact that a lot of the spellcasting classes or creatures have been changed to have attacks that mimic spell effects, so that things like, you know, people multi-classing rogues to get the evasion ability along with the sneak attack, it becomes less of an incentive to do that now. So anyway, I really like this book, and it's I need to get the regular version of this too, because this came in the rules expansion gift set along with the Xanathars and the Tashas that I've shown in this video, but I really should get like the standard version of this as well. But yeah, so that is number 2. And coming in at number 1, we've got Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. If you saw my review of this book, this probably isn't a huge shocker. I absolutely love this book for a few different reasons. Number 1, I actually really like the customization options for like the dragon's appearance. There's like tables you can roll on. There's things for like the dragon hordes themselves. I can sort of like make them stand out a little bit. But yeah, there's just some really cool stuff in here. Again, you've got like the mannerisms, the flaws, the bonds, sort of the cosmetic changes that you can make to the dragons. So some really cool stuff in here. I also love that artwork. I really, Dracoliches, I think, kind of suck in 5e because they don't really seem to have anything that makes them any more challenging than just the regular dragon. But the appearance of them is always really, really cool. So I do appreciate that here. But one of the things that I really love about this book, and we actually do have an example of the new 5e Black Dragon. So, like, I know some people don't like the new dragon designs for the upcoming monster manual, but, the Black Dragon was my favorite before, and I still like this version as well. But again, yeah, the thing that I really love about this is that they actually introduced the Great Worm Dragons. So we'll see if we can kind of find one here. And we do have, like, the Draconomicon stuff, so the different identifiers. But yeah, we've got the aspects of Bahamut, the aspect of Tiamat, which is really cool. Here we go. So we got the Great Worm Dragons. And the Great Worms is just a way of taking, because Great Worm was always a step above. Like, you had Ancient, Worm, and then Great Worm. And from 4th edition on, they just kind of stopped with the Ancient Dragons, and they got away from the Worm and Great Worm Dragons. But I like the fact that they're back here, and they're actually a lot more kind of frightening than originally, like the original dragons were, because they actually have the ability to, when they're reduced to 0 hit points, they basically like recharge their hit points. Now, the one thing that I would do is I would have them recharge all of their hit points. Instead, here, like, this one gets 425 back instead of the 533, but I would have it just regain all of them, and they get like these new options and new attack abilities that they can choose from when they kind of reach that point. So I just really like the fact that they included these. These are definitely a much more challenging version of the dragons to sort of deal with here, and I think they did a really good job with it. So from that reason, that along with the customization options, the new, like, the Draconomicon information that you have about, like, their layers and their life cycles and stuff like that, I just think that this was a really fantastic book. So that's why, for the rules expansions, Fizban's Treasury of Dragons is my favorite of them. But let me know in the comments below, what are some of your favorite rules expansions books? Were you Xanathars or Tashas as your favorite? Do you like the Fizban's Dragon book or the Glory of Giants? Did you like the Toma Foes? Let me know all that in the comments below. Anyway, thank you guys so very much for your time. I truly appreciate it. And we'll see you in the next ranking video, where I look at the different campaign settings or setting books released for 5th edition D&D. So I'm looking forward to that one. Thank you again for your time, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, Take care.